Welcome to TESO Consulting Group's DEI podcast series, Why Is It So Hard? Shining Through the Shadow of Resistance. I'm Dr. Tonya Breland.
And I am Erika Leek.
Welcome back.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Erika Leek.
And I'm Dr. Tonya Breland. And thank you for joining us again for our podcast,
Why Is This So Hard? Shining Through the Shadows of Resistance. In this podcast series, we discuss issues that prevent us from being socially just and free. And the goal here is to disrupt the status quo of racial inequality and inequity in systems. And through our discussions and through our work, we want each episode to challenge us to be the best, and in that, to be the change that we want to see.
That's correct. So what are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about diversity in leadership.
Yeah. And in particular, the diversity that looks like you and me, Black women.
Yeah.
We have to talk about being Black women in leadership because we have been Black women in leadership. We are Black women in leadership.
Yes.
And, you know, we have a few stories that we could tell about being
we absolutely do.
being Black women in leadership. So, first of all, you know, why do we even need to talk about this?
I think that's a good question. So in a previous episode, we talked about privilege, right? And in
a few
leadership
episodes.
Yes, we did. In leadership, there are certain traits that people look for in their leaders. And very often it doesn't look like Black or female. And so the challenge that we have very often when we are, you know, as Black women in leadership is we don't look the part of what someone, you know, thinks of as a leader. And so that means that as a leader, as a Black woman leader, very often there are challenges that really come from someone else not thinking that, you know, you are the right fit. Right. And yet, you know, you're in that position anyway. And you have to really sort of do the job, but then you have to sort of, you know, work through some of those challenges. And it can be, you know, really quite daunting.
It can be. You know, it's interesting. We don't see enough Black women in leadership, although we see more.
Yeah.
You know, and it's really encouraging when we see more. Like, I love when I can walk into an establishment or a business or an organization and, you know, they introduce the leader and the leader is a Black woman. Because then I'm like, Black girl magic. You know, and it's exciting to see because we just don't see it that much. You might recall from one of our previous, maybe a couple podcasts ago, we were given some statistics related to, you know, who's in leadership. You know, who holds leadership in all different industries. And so what we found predominantly in most of those spaces, either white men or white people led major organizations across this country. And that has been the norm. That's just how it's been. The people who hold the power are often not you and me. And so, you know, like I can recall, like I think it was last year, my husband and I took a trip and we were coming back and we were getting off the plane and we saw that the pilot was a Black woman. And we were so hyped about that. Like, it was just like, oh my God.
I've never seen a Black woman pilot. That's amazing.
That's the first one I've seen.
That's amazing.
And you know, the first time I took a flight was when I was a kid. And not that I fly all the time, but I had never seen one. And so we chatted with her, and then she let us take a picture with her in the cockpit.
That's so cool.
And then she like walked and talked with us while she said, if you hang on a minute, I'll walk with you. So she walked with us, she started talking, and she said, you know, there's a whole movement, I believe it was with United Airlines, I'm giving you a shout out, who said that they have a program for, to basically build a pipeline of Black female pilots.
Wow.
And I was like, how
That's
wonderful
awesome.
is that? And so, you know, she gave us like a little like flight pin, and She was just so nice. She was so nice. But we were really excited about that because that's not something we see all the time. We almost always assume that the pilot of the plane is a white man.
White man,
almost
that's right.
always assume that.
That's right.
And when we see somebody else, it's like, oh, you know. And what was interesting was she was the pilot. But, you know, typically the pilot will get on. The pilot didn't get on to speak. It was her assistant. And I don't know what, it was interesting. I'm not sure if she made a calculated decision that she was going to have her white male co-pilot speak intentionally because, you know, people in the, I don't know. I really, I don't know, but it was interesting.
Can you imagine if a little girl got a flight pin from her, a little black girl got a flight pin from her? Can you imagine the impact that would have on that girl?
Yeah.
That's
powerful,
amazing.
Powerful. I was listening to one of our friends is a superintendent, and he's a black man. And he has a podcast with his students. And one of the podcasts, what he does is he interviews his high school seniors. And so one of them was a black girl who has her pilot's license.
That's amazing.
And I was just like, that is so freaking amazing, you know, to see that. But we don't see a lot of that. And it's like, so I feel like we bear a responsibility as black leaders to really empower our younger black girls in particular to be able to do the work, to strive, to open doors, to present them with access and create opportunities for them to be able to follow paths that lead them into places of leadership.
Yeah. And I think that's, you know, so that works for girls and looking at leaders, but, you know, it also works for, you know, staff, you know, so when you're a leader in an organization, as a black woman, you know, there are black female, you know, staff people that also, you know, kind of say, oh, it can be done, you know, like I can do it, you know, and that makes a difference. I mean, I will say that I was the beneficiary of having some really great black female mentors. And they really helped me to develop those leadership skills, you know. That was so important.
Yes. Yeah. Which brings me to the conversation about, you know, mentoring, which I think is really important as well. But if there are no black mentors in positions of leadership who can mentor and bring along another generation, because what we do know is people tend to help people who look like them. So many people have mentors that look just like them. And what often doesn't happen is there aren't enough black women who are in leadership that can mentor younger black women. And so we often have to look to, you know, white leadership to mentor us. There are those who will do it, but many times they tend to flock to those that are just like them, which is, you know, can point to some unconscious bias perhaps.
Well, they see themselves, right? Like,
that's what they do. I see
I
me
was
in
like
you.
that, you know,
Yes, right.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you have to seek mentorship. I think I shared with you that I didn't get a mentor I had a mentor as a teenager, but as an adult, I didn't get a mentor until a few years ago, literally, when I was getting my doctorate.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was a black man that was the mentor, and I did have a black woman as well. No, actually, so I back it up. It was the black woman was there first.
Okay.
So, but it was probably a couple years before that.
Okay.
You know, and she was the one who was really behind pushing me to go back and get that doctorate. You got to go back and get that doctorate, Tonya. She kept saying to me, and I'm like, yeah, but I don't really know what I want to study. You just have to do it. Just do it. And she was right. I'm glad I did it. Because I can see where that privilege of education has opened doors for me that pre-doctorate were not open. So there was something to that. She knew what she was talking about.
Right.
But I didn't have people in leadership who took the time to mentor me. I kind of had a mentor when I was becoming a principal, but that was because it was required.
Got you.
You know,
yes,
but without that and it was a white male. And without that requirement, I don't know
Yeah.
if I would have had, anyone
Yeah.
to mentor me.
Yeah. I had a mentor early. We worked at a state agency, the agency that I worked for years ago. Um, and I was in an office that was an office of leadership. So it was the office of the State Board of Ed, but I hadn't started leading it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And in that office, I met someone in another division, and she was just a wonderful, like, she really, I talk a lot about, like, she sort of gave me the keys. So I was able to sort of like access like norms that I didn't necessarily know. I don't know that I would have picked up on them, maybe eventually, but after sometimes you run afoul of them and then you realize, like, oh, this is part of the
They
culture.
don't do that.
Yeah,
Right.
they don't do
Yeah.
that here. So she kind of helped me with that, and that was really crucial. It was really instrumental in my being seen as someone who was a viable replacement for my director that retired. That was a big part of it. Like, she just kind of helped me with, like, this is what you do. Like, they'll never tell you, but this is what you do, this is what you don't do. And that was really, really instrumental in my experience.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a number of different leadership experiences. The first major one well, no, it wasn't the first major one, but in the education space, it was the first major one, was becoming a principal. And I was hired by a white male superintendent, and he hired me because I had won a national education award. And he had a teacher in his district who had also won that national education award. So he knew the caliber of educators because he knew what this teacher was like. And he's like, well, if she won that, and we both happened to have won that same year. So he's like, if she won this, she must be the same kind of caliber of educator. And he said to me, because I didn't have the experience as a principal. I had been a vice principal for 1 year. And he said, the reason why I hired you was because you were a milk-in educator. And I was like, wow, okay. But, he was being honest. Can't blame him. I wasn't mad about it. But being in that position, in that role, I realized the responsibility I had because I was also in a district and in a school in particular that was a school that was in need of improvement. It was a majority minority school, meaning that the majority of the students were Black students. And they had a very large percentage of those students on free and reduced lunch, and they were struggling in many ways. And while their teachers were overwhelmingly white, there was one teacher of color in the building when I was hired. And, I was different for them. They had a woman in the principal role before me, but it was not a Black woman. And so for many of them, I was probably the first Black leader that they had seen in that position. But I can tell you the little girls were like, like flocking to me, especially the little Black girls. And their parents were as well, and it was really, I could see and I understood the mantle that was on my shoulders. And I knew that I had a responsibility to carry and conduct myself in a way that was professional and really effective. And I also went in there with a goal in mind. Like I didn't like the fact that the school was on the bottom and really struggling. And I'm like, we've got to do something. And I'm like, and I'm going to help you guys do that. And we're going to work together and we're going to make this happen. And we did it. We got off of the state list of schools that said that, we were in need of improvement and we no longer were in status. But it was the work of that collaborative work that I had the privilege of being able to lead. But it took me a while to gain the trust of the people that I led.
So how did you do it? How did you gain their trust?
I gave them a voice and let them participate in the decision-making process where they could. Yeah, that was one of the biggest pieces for me.
Do you think that up until, you came there, they had that experience?
I don't know that they did. I think that they were kind of used to being told how things were going to be. But for me, it was important that they were a part of the conversation and a part of the decision making, and that they had voice.
Yeah. I think that's part of the benefits of, and we know that there are benefits to diversity in leadership, But I think that's that's one of the benefits, right? A different leadership style.
Because I have that collectivist approach.
Exactly. And I think sometimes people don't get that. And then, they, come in contact with somebody who offers that. One, they have to kind of learn it, right? So, okay, so I'm not being told what to do now. So now I have to be a part of figuring out what it is the approach or the strategy. So what does that look like? And that in and of itself builds capacity, right? But then to be a part of it, I could see how that would sort of you would be able to gain trust, garner their trust and their support, which we know is really important, I think, in an organization. So talk about a little, because I don't know if you were the first Black female principal there
in that building.
In that building, okay. So talk about the relationship with the parents. Then, I mean, they must have been really. Or what was their disposition, towards you, and how were you able to, to use that support to support the whole community, the whole organization?
Yeah, I would have to say the parents were actually really good. So I remember the very first PTA meeting, and it was packed, and I saw the former principal at an outing somewhere. And she said, "Oh, how was that first, PTA meeting or whatever?" And I said, "Oh, there were a lot of parents, that showed up." And she said, "Oh, that's just the first meeting. They're not going to come back." But they did keep coming back. Maybe not as large, but there were a large number of parents who I think felt a little bit more invested and welcomed.
Wow.
So remember, I said it was a majority minority school. So, those parents then I think started feeling like they have a voice here in this school. And I would bring them in to be a part of like a larger advisory committee, so that their voice could be heard as well. I wanted them to know that they were important and that this is a partnership. It's us together working to help your child be successful. And I think they appreciated that.
Yeah. I really love that, because again, it's just that diversity, it's not just about numbers, right? Like there's a real benefit here. And when you start to, open up your definitions and your vision of leadership to others, then you get those different styles that come with benefits.
Right.
That come with benefits.
I also had a great relationship with the white parents in the building too. Like I had a really good relationship with the parents, and they trusted me, and they knew that I had their child's best interest at heart. And I think that was really important because I cared about all the children, not just the Black kids. I cared about all the children, the success of all the children. And there was one point where I was challenged in a very interesting way. I may have shared this before, where a white male parent came in. His son had been fighting, and he came in to meet with me. And he came in with sunglasses with Confederate flags in the corners of the sunglasses. I don't know if I ever shared that.
No.
And I was initially taken aback and even thought about being intimidated because it seemed like an act of intimidation. Like, let me come in here and intimidate you, Black woman, And in the end, because I was like, I refuse to be intimidated by your sunglasses, which are absolutely making a statement.
Yes.
And I said, we're just going to talk about what we're here for, and that is your son's conduct. And when we talked about the son's conduct and then brought the son in, and the son said, yep, I did that. I did what the principal said I did. Then the father was like, okay, he takes the glasses off, and now he's like, disciplining his son, verbally, like saying what's not going to happen and what should have happened and whatever. And so from that point on, his son would get in trouble often, but from that point on, anytime he came into the building, he did not wear those sunglasses after that. So it was almost like I had to prove to him that I wasn't like singling out his son, and I was not, and that, that I'm not here to like challenge your authority as a parent or anything like that. It's really about creating an atmosphere where all the children feel safe and they feel like they can enjoy the schooling experience.
That's great. That's really wonderful.
Yeah.
That's really wonderful. And so So what do you think you learned in terms of, like your experience as a leader that kind of helped your next experience as a leader?
Well, I mean, one is it helps me learn more about people,
Yeah.
and I always find myself still having to be very cautious, not to rub people the wrong way. I understand that I have to prove myself many times before people will trust me, and I always feel like I have to do more than what maybe my white counterparts have to do in the same position and role, because I've also been questioned with like, who do you know? As though I did not earn the right to be in this leadership position. And I know that I've also worked hard for where I've, what I've gotten. And, what's tough sometimes is to be challenged on, the role you have and who you are, and feeling like people are looking at you or asking those questions because I'm Black or I'm a Black woman.
Yeah.
And my white counterparts may not have had those same questions asked of them.
Yeah, that reminds me of when I served as director, of an office. I had a white woman who was a professional in the office, and I can remember, somebody asking me a question, and then going to ask her to verify it. It was almost like I wasn't trusted, and I had to prove my competence, even though I had worked in that office, like in that position of the person that they were asking previously. But it's like they didn't really trust my, like my judgment or my competence. And, and I had to spend some time like proving that, which was really frustrating. It was just really frustrating. I did well in that position. I just can remember like resenting, like, okay, I got to prove, because like commissioners would switch out, and when the commissioner switched out and there would be a new set of assistant commissioners and a new set of, I had to start all over again and kind of prove, and it was just like, goodness gracious, but it took its toll. That took its toll. So the job itself I did it. I don't know that it was a great fit in terms of like how I felt about what I wanted to do, but I did the job really well. Did the job really well.
And I'm sure you did.
Yeah, but but that was a really frustrating piece of it. I was in my 30s, so probably a little on the younger side in terms of like that position, and Black and female. And I felt like there were constant, um, um, just constant, not statements, but concerns, or even, about like, okay, is this really the right person for this job? And I mean, I proved that I was, but I just, had some challenges around like the not getting the benefit of the doubt, not having, them not assuming that I knew that what I was doing.
Right. Right.
And the board that I worked for, they were always I don't say fair, they were always supportive. And so it was almost like once someone said like, "Oh, she's really good," then it was like almost needed like somebody to speak for me.
Sponsors.
And that was so. Again, that was insulting, because the other directors in the department did not have to contend with that. The white directors in the department did not have to contend with that same kind of the need for you to be like approved, or a white person saying she's good, and then it was, then I didn't have an issue. So like I had those experiences over and over and over again because of the nature of that state agency. When you switch gubernatorial administrations, you get a new set of leaders, and then it's like, here we are all over again.
Yeah. What did you learn about yourself as a leader, or as a Black leader?
As a Black leader, first of all, I learned that I could do it. Right. I learned that I was because I wasn't, when I started, I was like, okay, can I do this? So I learned that I could do it. I trusted in my own competence. Like you belong here. Right. I also learned that I did have a different kind of leadership style. So there were, at the time, there were 4 people in the office. And I really wanted them. It's like Steve Jobs said years later, you don't hire smart people and tell them what to do. Like, I really wanted them to flourish, like, and to show off in their competence and then, in what they were able to do. So I have more of like a shared kind of, leadership style. It's like, what are we going to do in this office? So very much, I think, the way that you did in terms of giving people a voice, and because of that, my staff, I would say we were loyal to each other. I don't like to say they were loyal to me and I didn't reciprocate it. We were loyal to each other, and we were very, very close knit. And in that, we were called on to do even more things. Like once, so we were pretty tight. But I kind of learned that about myself. Like, I don't need to be the sage on the stage. Like, I don't need to be the one with all the answers. Sure. It would be much better if we kind of all had the answers together. And I think I also learned I'm pretty smart.
You are, very much so.
I'm pretty smart. I think I'm doing this, so yeah.
Why do you think we need diversity in leadership?
Because I think the diversity, different people of different backgrounds bring different styles and skills and knowledge sets. Like, so when you bring that to that space, we can have different experienso and we can solve some different problems because we have a different set of skills here.
I think so.
Yeah, and I think so I wasn't really a part of, I've never been white, never been, at the time I was sort of just coming, because I grew up working class. So I don't know that I didn't grow up middle class. I had a very different view around resources, very different view around resiliency, very different views of, interacting with people. Although I came up in a home where there was like an authoritarian style, we had a collective approach to family, right? We had a collective approach to, making money. We had a collective approach to all these things. And I think that's what it is. I think that those different backgrounds and experiences provide, a different set of skills in that space.
Yeah, no, I like that. That was really good. And we did a previous podcast about collectivism versus individualism. And, what I hear even, in what you're sharing and even what I shared, I hear that collectivist approach and how much it really benefited, the folks that we worked with. And it just creates also diversity of thought as well, because we come with a different lens.
Right.
And that lens informs our decision making in many ways. And so we may think of some perspectives, about the Black experience that may influence what's going on. I realized in my last employment role, where I was, like, say if there's tiers, like, there's a top person and then there's one person, then I'm right there underneath that person, and then there's a whole bunch of other people underneath, and it was government, so a lot of the decision making really comes from the governor. But I realized that in the position that I had a voice for those who didn't have a voice. And so I used my voice often to advocate for change in policy or whatever, and that was really important. And so, I say this to, women in leadership, or Black women in leadership, or Black people, or people of color in leadership, or people who are typically marginalized. Use your voice. Use your voice for those who don't have a voice when you are in a role of leadership.
I think that's hugely important. It's hugely important, because very often we're in, we're in that position for a reason.
Yep, we
right?
are.
We're in that, and that's part of the purpose.
And to whom much is given,
much is required.
Much is required.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us. We'd love to hear your views and your perspectives and your experience on leadership. And so let us know. We're on all the social media platforms.
We are.
We would love to hear your experiences.
Yep. Thank you for joining us. Again, I am Dr. Tonya Breland.
And I'm Erika Leek, and we really enjoyed talking to you today.
We'll see you again.